Investor Group Services is a private equity-focused boutique consultancy that prides itself on fostering a collegial, collaborative, and non-hierarchical culture. The firm puts on regular social events like happy hours, case team dinners, golf excursions, and office visits to Fenway Park to watch the Red Sox. In addition, due to the firm's smaller size, every IGS employee plays a part in the firm's growth and development. IGS pays it back with extensive on-the-job and formal professional development training and mentorship. If you're looking to start or continue a career in consulting, look no further than IGS. Explore current job openings at the link in the show notes or at igsboston.com.
Hi, my name's Edward, and I'm going to be pursuing a career in consulting upon graduation. As an intern for Management Consulted, I would love it if you were able to fill out a quick survey linked in the show note description. This is going to help Strategy Simplified improve and become far more tailored to you, the individual, looking for a career in consulting. Thank you. Welcome to Strategy Simplified. In today's episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dylan Malloy, a talented individual who's pursuing his PhD at Drexel University and will be joining EY Parthenon in the near future. Throughout our conversation, Dylan shares valuable insights into recruitment best practices, as well as useful resources for aspiring professionals. And lastly, he also shares his personal journey and experiences that have shaped his career. We hope you enjoy this episode. Okay, so thank you for joining us on Strategy Simplified. Would you mind just sharing a quick 1-minute introduction of you and your background?
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you for having me. My name is Dylan Malloy. I am originally from Charlotte, North Carolina. I did my bachelor's degree in health and exercise science at Pfeiffer University in North Carolina, where I also played Division II lacrosse. Throughout my undergraduate career, I thought I wanted to do physical therapy and go through physical therapy school, but I gravitated more towards scientific research. And that's what brought me to Drexel University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I just completed my PhD in neuroscience this past August 2022. The array, of my research experiences, throughout undergraduate and graduate school using various interventions like exercise and non-invasive ventilation, non-invasive spinal cord stimulation, and the various neurological disorders I got to study is kind of what inspired me to, get the broader interests of technologies and therapies and really, leading that to commercialized treatments. And so this inspired me to pursue consulting as a career, which I'm happy to say I successfully received an offer from EY Parthenon this past summer to join their life sciences strategy and transaction practice.
Wow, well that's a pretty awesome list of accomplishments there, and I'm excited to definitely dive into a lot of the different ones. First of all, congrats on the massive EY Parthenon offer. That's a huge accomplishment for anyone, let alone this awesome sector that they have. So do you think you could just walk us through the high-level overview and the major key points in that journey of recruiting with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I should preface this by saying I've heard, many others' stories, especially on the Strategy Simplified podcast, just about others having this, blunt, intense, truncated interview prep and like 6 weeks of time receiving an offer after that. And all I have to say is hats off to them because I envy that. That is not at all, was not at all my journey. I loosely started my prep in January 2021, but at that time I was more or less oblivious to, firm deadlines, the existence of summer bridge programs, and the fact that hiring could be 12 to 15 months out of actually, graduating and starting. So, I didn't have a resume at that time. I didn't have a LinkedIn profile made. It was kind of a mess at that time. I started to hear about the existence of these summer bridge programs, especially for like my demographic as an advanced degree candidate. And so I, tried to apply to any and all of them as I could. I was pretty much unsuccessful across the board. I spent more time trying to perfect resumes and cover letters and my case and interview prep. I tried to network as much as possible. And then when, full-time applications came around that, summer of 2021, I, again, basically applied anywhere I could across the board as soon as they opened up. And it was also pretty unsuccessful. So I didn't get my first break until I had a first round interview with LEK in August 2021. That was my first ever real-time live interview case, and it did not go very well. Did not do well. It was a rough case, and so not much surmounted after that. Throughout that time, I was really interested in EY Parthenon's life sciences practice. They were a more kind of abundant firm that I could find people who had life sciences PhDs, people I could speak with, who kind of really understood the ambiguity of my recruiting pathway. I think it's come a long way, but it's still not as explicit as maybe the undergraduate or MBA higher pathway. But I got a break with EY Parthenon. I made it to their first and second round interviews in October and November 2021. But again, I was not as successful in getting an offer. So that kind of brought us to 2022. I just kept at it, kept trying to get better, just doing the same old. I repeated the entire process. This time, EY Parthenon started their inaugural bridge program, Embark to EY, for advanced degree candidates, and I successfully got accepted there. I attended. I had a great time. It converted into a first round kind of super day interview, which ultimately paid off for me when I got an offer from them in the summer of 2022. I had other unsuccessful interviews for summer programs and full-time offers in between. I had other successful interviews. I did, get access to another summer program, which converted into full-time interviews and an offer. But, it was EYP where I really wanted to go, and I was grateful to receive that chance. But I guess that's pretty much the high-level, not-so-smooth journey I had to getting that offer.
Yeah, I don't often hear a very smooth journey. I think that's the really tough but also beautiful part of consulting, is that it's so turbulent and strenuous that it's so sweet when you get that offer. So again, huge congrats on that. I'm curious, what made you choose EY Parthenon specifically?
Yeah, there's a multitude of reasons. Like I said, there was just a lot of if I was looking to cold reach out to people on LinkedIn, me personally, I always tried to look for people with a common denominator. In that case, it was, having the life sciences background, having the life sciences PhD. I only wanted to do life sciences consulting. So they had a life sciences practice that they advertised as being, relatively strong. And everyone I talked to just was able to give me that time of day. There wasn't a single person that, didn't take the time to speak with me. I enjoyed speaking with them. They were, very competitive in more of the strategy and transaction practices and functions in the life sciences. And so that's just where I felt like would be a great place, to kick off my career.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately what it comes down to for a lot of people, and especially for me as well. Is the people there, and it's the people that want to come out and help you through that process. As, like you said, ambiguous and stressful as it can be, I think that's what makes the difference. I want to shift things a little bit to Drexel. So I know you took a lot of skill building roles, leadership, market research, etc. What was the value of those experiences in helping you identify the interest in consulting and or successfully navigate your consulting recruiting journey?
Yeah, it's a good question. In many ways, I would say a lot of those leadership, skill building, extracurricular roles, things outside of my PhD, were probably some of the most important of my experiences in grad school for, various reasons. For example, I spent a few years as the vice president for professional development for our graduate student association. And, I sought out that role specifically because I knew I wanted to find a career outside of academic research, and I just didn't know what. And so I took that role to kind of provide those events for the student body and give myself that experience and exposure, which is ultimately what led me to finding career seminars on consulting and the entire existence of consulting in general. A lot of the leadership roles I had, I was the executive vice president and president of the Graduate Student Association. That's just where I gained most of my managerial skills. I mean, those executive roles is really, what allowed me to have to, manage up, manage down, manage at level with my peers, with program directors, division directors, the dean of the college, things of that sort. bench research, bench science by nature is very independent. And so a lot of those roles and experiences is where I was able to discuss, my ability to have people management, to teamwork skills that I could discuss, interpersonal conflict. A lot of that during behavioral interviews came from those experiences. And then the market research role was, for me, I knew at that point I wanted to go into consulting, and I was looking for anything to broaden my horizons, give me some, difference on my resumes, different experiences outside of the research. And so this, Coulter Foundation, Coulter program at Drexel is, integrated to help bench science labs that, create potentially translatable and commercializable technologies, get a bit of seed funding and maybe start a startup or get things out licensed. And so I thought that was a perfect role. I got to work as a market research analyst. I would help these project teams just get an idea of competitive landscapes. And honestly, that was most of my conversations with directors or partners of the firms, and all my interviews was about this role because, one, it was a great conversation starter, but two, those skills were directly relevant to kind of the analytical and conceptual work consultants would use or need. So I think if there's one thing I could say, especially to, those who are in the sciences or in PhDs, getting something on your resume that is outside of the academic or bench research realm is pretty huge in my opinion, especially if you're coming from a science or non-business advanced degree background.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was very, very well put. Now shifting back just a little bit to the recruiting process itself. Obviously, you mentioned there were a lot of ups and downs, and I think that's the case for everyone's experience. Do you know if you had a biggest obstacle? And if so, I'd love to hear, one, what it was, and two, how you overcame it.
We'll be right back after this quick break.
Have you ever heard a new digital trend and thought to yourself, okay, does this really matter? Asking the right questions helps you cut through the noise and get down to what matters most. I'm Jim Hertzfeld, host of the What If, So What podcast, where we discover what's possible with digital and figure out how to make it real by asking what if, so what, and most importantly, now what? Subscribe and listen, and together we can turn big ideas into tangible actions so you can get shit done.
Yeah, I mean, based on that overview of my journey, as you might be able to gauge, honestly, for me, I think the biggest obstacle was probably just constant rejection. I clearly had a lot more failures than successes throughout the process. Like I said, it didn't seem as some people seem to have very streamlined successes, and that is great. But, you work hard to perform and to kind of show out during these interviews as best you can. And, it just sucks, for lack of better words, when it doesn't pan out. So, I think that was my biggest obstacle. And I think I really just overcame it by keeping at it and by staying persistent. Every rejection or poor interview on my part or just a failure was kind of my opportunity to go back to the drawing board of my prep and see what I could do better, see what I could focus on or what wasn't truly polished, whether that be casing or, the interviewing part, like behavioral questions. And I think it's a bit of an ego thing. I was and am really fully confident in my ability to do this job, to do consulting. I was fully confident in my ability to get an offer. I just knew I needed to show it. I needed to perform during these interviews. So, it can be very demoralizing in a sense to constantly be met with those rejections. But I think my biggest advice is just to commit 100% mentally to the process. I think there were, many, many times telling people about, who are not familiar with the consulting recruiting process or pathway, just, telling them about my failures basically. And they would just, always say, well, what is your backup plan if consulting doesn't work out? And for me, I was confused by that question because there was no backup plan. For me, there was no other option. Consulting is what I was going to do one way or the other, and I wasn't going to stop trying until I got an offer. So I think just commit and keep at it.
Dylan, I love that, and I think that's some really valuable information. I definitely felt the exact same way, and I know that anyone else I've spoken to who's been successful in the recruiting process has had the exact same mindset, in that you really just have to fully commit and take rejection on the chin and keep moving. And so I'm really glad that you're able to do that as well. I know it's not easy when it's just rejection after rejection and you're just waiting for a glimmer of hope.
Yeah, it's just the nature of the competitiveness, nature of the game. But like I said, if you just take it on the chin, take it with a grain of salt, assess yourself and just keep at it. I think the dominoes will fall eventually.
Exactly. And talking of those dominoes falling, I know they're a big part of, a big fear for everyone in terms of recruiting for consulting is the case interview. I'd love to hear a little bit about your case interview preparation process.
Yeah, definitely big fear. And I know when I started it, it was ultra vague concept for me. So, my case interview prep process was pretty long and arduous. I think from the beginning of 2021, when I loosely started this prep, to getting an offer in summer 2022, I probably did well over 50, maybe even 100 cases. I would even go back and repeat cases, a handful of them, redo structures, but I had a high volume because it was, a longer period of time than I guess I wished. But, my casing strategy changed or updated as I needed it to based on where I felt I needed more work. But really, the components more or less stayed the same. I only had time to practice on the weekends just with the nature of being in lab Monday through Friday. So I would spend anywhere from like 2 to 12 hours each weekend just doing this kind of prep. I always started with case drills or just drilling any component of the case. So like at the beginning, because I was unfamiliar with everything, I drilled each section of a case, kind of breaking down the components just to get high reps of practice. Over time, I think I always would drill just the structures. To be the case structure is probably the most important component of the case, just the best way to start out strong. So that's usually how I would start, kind of my prep process to get my wheels turning for the day. Each day I would practice. Next, I would usually find a weak point. For me, I would usually practice my mental math. That was not always the best for me in each case. So I'd find problem books, written word math problems, and I would just do those out verbally, always trying to verbally speak the question, recap it, clarify kind of my process for solving it and solving it out loud, things like that. Then I would practice full case. So I would go through a full case by myself. I would act as both interviewer and interviewee, kind of verbalizing everything aloud. That can be pretty awkward, especially the first time doing it. You're just sitting there talking to yourself by yourself on both ends of the spectrum. But I remember the first time I did like a live practice with a partner and everything felt like word vomit, So it's really important to verbalize it because that's exactly how the interview is going to be. So even if you're by yourself, usually that component that I did by myself, the whole case I did by myself, I would end up giving to a case partner. So I had a case partner where we would meet pretty much every weekend, and we would both facilitate and receive cases from each other, give constructive feedback on that sort. I filled in gaps during the week just trying to listen to, others give cases like on Strategy Simplified, watching YouTube videos, reading anything about case tips. But I'd say pretty much that is the overall, structure and strategy I took to my case prep in and out over the whole course of time. Things like those case structure drills and math drills are things I even did the morning before I had an interview just to, get my mindset right.
Yeah, perfect. And that's the way to tackle it and just break it down. I really like what you said about the case drills. I think going back and looking back, I think that would have saved me a lot more time if I'd really drilled each specific part instead of just the repetition with the cases. So I love the advice there.
We'll be right back after this quick break. Feeling stuck in your prep process? Join Black Belt. Black Belt gives you expert help. You get 8 one-hour, one-to-one coaching sessions with an MBB coach. You get access to unlimited digital materials and homework that we will assign you in between sessions to help you quickly accelerate your progress. If you need to be interview ready quickly, join Black Belt today. Click the link in the show notes to learn more.
Moving on a little bit in terms of the resources, I'd love to hear 2 or 3 resources that you give yourself the most credit for in terms of your preparation.
Yeah, for sure. There is probably an overwhelming number of resources tailored to breaking into consulting and practicing this case prep that exists. And it can be kind of paralyzing just to figure out where you should spend most of your time. I know it took me a while to really find the resources that I meshed with. So I guess as a disclosure, this is going to sound super biased, but I promise it comes at no incentive to me to say it. It's just an honest opinion. But for me, Management Consultant's entire website and platform was where I found most valuable resource to spend my time. I just learned, especially kind of late in the game, early in the process, though, just about the open access information, reading anything from resume, cover letter prep, firm profiles, just interview tips, things like that. So one of my top tools, especially from the website, was the case library. I was getting frustrated spending weekends trying to sift the internet for cases, especially cases that could, provide you with feedback on not just like a blank case. If I didn't know whether I was doing something right or not, it didn't help me. Firms will give, sometimes put a free case of the month each month, but it just wasn't enough volume for me to really work on drilling stuff and practice. And so, I enjoyed the fact that I had access to a full array of cases, over hundreds of cases that I could separate by a certain problem, difficulty, firm stuff, things like that. Next, as you could probably imagine, for me was also the case drilling, structure drilling videos that Management Consultant has. I thought those were great just because, one, it helped me get a lot of just, the wheels turning in terms of getting my mind into the business and casing aspect, but also it was a great way to just start strong for each case. So you listen to a prompt, you'd have to quickly write notes down, recap it, clarify some questions, and then just get right into a structuring problem. So I really enjoyed, those two tools. I think, lastly, as a resource, it's really important just to give credit to my case partner. It goes a long way to have someone you can, who understands the process and who can be reliably a source that you can practice with. He and I worked together, every weekend, weekly. We were both doing our PhDs together, or not together, but just in general doing our PhDs. Weekends were our only free times, so, doing that case practice in the weekends in the winter was fine. In the summer, it sucked because you just want to be outside. You don't want to be, practicing for hours on end. But, he was reliable, gave constructive criticism. I really couldn't have been proficient without someone to practice with. So, I think that's really important, is just finding resources that, you find useful for you personally or for your style, and then getting a case partner, at least one that's reliable that you can continuously practice with, because that person-to-person practice is definitely crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's some really good pieces of advice there. I think the people that I cased with were absolutely by far some of the biggest impact in terms of my ability to succeed and better myself. What about for people who are just interested in breaking in and they're just getting started? Do you have any advice on where to start? I know you mentioned some advice there, but I'd love to hear if you have like a high-level overview of maybe where they can start.
Yeah, if you're already familiar with what consulting is, what consultants do, and you're committed and interested into breaking into that profession, I guess step one is just to hit up Google is basically how I started. Like I said, there are so many resources, some with similar, some with opposing opinions or information. Just Google around, find what you like, find what you vibe with, what you feel like you can easily digest, and just start reading. I think it's a good place to just start, getting yourself familiar, especially with just the process and what people's experiences are. Like I said, for me, it was, eventually when I found Management Consultant's website, it almost seemed like a one-stop shop, but that's just where I found information more digestible. But there's a lot of resources out there. And I think, for a place to start, most importantly, I would say is with timelines. Get familiar with interviewing and hiring cycle timelines, the deadlines for these things, for applications, and work your way from there to really see how you should strategize your prep. I know in my experience, I was not at all familiar with it, so it constantly kept me behind the curve, and that's probably one of my bigger points of advice for anyone who is currently doing a PhD and looking to break into consulting. Get realistic with your time frame that you have in mind for your dissertation defense, and then go from there. The PhD dissertation and graduation completion is just so fluid and ambiguous. I remember thinking that I could graduate in 1.5 years for like 3 years straight. It's very ambiguous. It never works out the way you want it to work out. You just kind of have to have that realistic defense goal in mind and then work backwards from there. Because like I said, I was behind the curve immediately, especially as firms started to shift their dates sooner and sooner year over year. I was just not in tune to the fact that I could interview and have a job 12 to 15 months before I even graduated. I think my next advice in that regard, especially when it comes to PhDs, is, and I touched on this briefly, but it's just to, have something non-academic on your resume, some kind of experience to show that you're willing and wanting to leave the academic world. I personally didn't have access to consulting clubs or anything like that at Drexel. But really, you just want anything you can try and display that, you can think outside the academic mindset, and you are looking for ways actively to, really kind of leave the hard bench research behind. And then I think what could be broadly able for anybody, if you're starting out, is just to start networking with people and network pretty hard. I think it's a great place to start, especially if you want firm-specific or direct information. Like I said, some of my most valuable information came from directly talking to people who had a PhD, graduated, and started at a firm because, they understood the process I was going through, and they were able to ask more direct questions than I could find just Googling or talking to a recruiter, which I had many times that just were not familiar with my demographic as opposed to the undergraduate or MBA hire. So, I could keep going, but I think those are huge, especially some of those aspects for those with a PhD background.
Well, you know what? You beat me to my next question. I wanted to ask you if you had anything specifically for PhD candidates. So props to you for addressing that. Again, I know we've talked about this long process. Looking back, are there any things you would have done differently? I know you mentioned maybe starting some things earlier or later. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's always in hindsight, right? I guess, if I could do something differently, it would have been probably getting some kind of, coaching or one-on-one help sooner in the process. Like I said, my prep was long and steady. And so I think part of my problem, especially when I wasn't familiar with a lot of the deadlines, was I had a really slow rise to a proficient level. I thought I had more time than I did to prep. And so I was just kind of going it slow and steady. And then everything shifted earlier, and I needed to kind of, fight my way after the fact. So it just took a long time to become practiced and to get, familiar with every aspect and understand what a true proficient level is and what is necessary to, really get past that first round, get past that second round, things of that sort. I was cost sensitive as a broke PhD student, so I was a little risk aversive for making some poor investments kind of into resources and things like that early on in my, decision to commit to this career. But that is something I wish I just bit the bullet and did. I think, if I could have saved time in any which way of someone pinpointing, looking at my process, because you don't often get a lot of feedback during these live cases. So it was hard for me to pinpoint myself of where was my truly weak points and what did I need to spend more time on. So if I could have done something differently, it might have been to do something of that sort. There's pros and cons to casing a lot and casing a little, in my opinion. I could see both being beneficial in its own way, but it can be exhausting. So I think if I could go back and be better, faster, sooner, I probably would have.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think even after 50, 60 cases, if you haven't got that direct pinpointed feedback, you can feel a bit lost. Okay, so I want to level with you student to student. As both of us have gone through the recruiting process recently, I'd love to hear your opinion on what's one thing that you think everyone gets wrong about the recruiting process.
That's a good question. I guess student from student kind of getting through the other side, maybe one thing I think most people get wrong about the process is just that everyone's out to get you, maybe. Especially, like I said, when you have a lot of seemingly, failures, and it can be kind of demoralizing in that sense. It's undoubtedly challenging, very competitive, very intense. And you are being, tested with this casing. But I think if you treat it like a test, you'll have a harder time. At least that is, my mindset, how my mindset evolved over time. I think in my experience, not all my interviewers were prepped with my life story or background or everything I submitted in my application. Our interviewers ranged from recent hires to years and years of experience. They all had different backgrounds and interests, and they just wanted to have a conversation each interview. The more conversational and natural and collegial you can be, I think the better. Granted, you only have so much time in an interview to finish your case and get through it, but if you can find a way to connect with your interviewer somehow, some way in that interview, I think, and keep it conversational, it'll just work out in your favor. I've probably had every version of an interview and cases go every which way you could imagine. But at least just retrospectively thinking, the less stiff an interview felt, it just felt better. Even if it didn't really surmount to success for me, I felt better about how I did or my efforts if it just, if I was a little less rigid with it.
Yeah, I think everyone thinks you need to be some sort of robot that can structure a case interview with 100% accuracy, and that's where you leave it. Whereas I think, again, a lot of these people are, you're their 10th, 20th interview of the day, and they just want to have a nice conversation and get through it with you together. And I think I also thought for some reason that, and maybe it's the way people advertise it or something, but I really thought that all my interviews were going to be, conniving people that were trying to trip me up places and trick me into giving them wrong answers. But at the end of the day, they want to see you succeed just as much as you do, which is, I think, a really lovely surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it goes so many ways. I had interviews where I was the stiff one and I felt it after the fact. Interviews where my interviewer was kind of just, stonewall, and like everything I tried, I couldn't seem to break through to like have some kind of rapport. And you still feel like it didn't go well at the end of it. And then some where, I could have done way better during the case, but the conversation was there that I didn't feel as bad with the interview after the fact. So, it's tough to say. I don't know the answer specifically. It changes probably person to person, time to time, but the best you can do is, try and be as relaxed with it as possible, I think. And it is hard to just get yourself into doing everything, kind of as it's supposed to be, as it's needed, and then getting it to be more fluid, which is just what comes with practice.
Yeah, absolutely. Practice makes perfect there, I think. I'd love to shift a little bit to the future. What are you most looking forward to when beginning your role with Parthenon?
That's tough too, because I'm just looking forward to everything. I'm really excited to start at EYP. I'm anxious just to get right into projects and just the consulting work that I've been wanting to do. I guess, one thing I would say I'm most looking forward to is just the ability to be staffed on a wide variety of projects. And I know, coming from their, talking with their consultants, coming from their summer program, they have a wide range that they really work with. And, that's always been one driving force for me wanting to do consulting in the first place. And one of the most appealing things is just that breadth of information and topics you could be working on. It's nice to know a lot of information about something and be considered like an expert in a topic, similar to what is your life as a PhD student. But personally, I like the diversity, so I'm kind of just excited to be put on projects where it's like, okay, it's time to become a well-versed, in this topic, brand new topic as soon as possible. So yeah, I'm just excited for, the diversity of subjects, working with the people there, everyone who's been, already there, well-trained, a brand new cohort, and just getting right into it.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's going to be really exciting. I think the worst thing about consulting is that when you get the offer, you have to wait sometimes a year and a half before you even get to start doing what you're so excited to do. But I think it'll be well worth the wait.
Builds the anticipation, right?
Exactly. Couldn't have put it better myself. Okay, well, that's most of the questions I have for you. Now, I don't know if you've listened to many interviews specifically on Management Consulted, but one thing we love to do is ask a few kind of fun, quirky questions. So I have 3 kind of rapid-fire questions when you're ready. I'd love to get your input on them.
I have, so let's see what you have in store for me.
Yeah, so first one, pretty basic, but if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
Superpower is a tough one. There's just so many to choose from. I guess I will give you 2 points of view for this. One will be like a fantastical superpower, and one could be considered maybe a more realistic superpower. So in terms of like, the fantastical version, definitely the ability to like apparate, teleport, however you want to call it, go place to place instantaneously. I think the reason for that is because I always want to travel. I like traveling. I like going places, being in many places at once, but of course there's just never enough time. I think probably, the worst part about traveling, especially afar, is you burn like 1 or 2 days round trip just traveling, right? Especially if you're taking long flights, something like that. And I hate that it takes so much time. So I just want to get there. I just want to get to the place that I want to explore. So if I could just do that in the blink of an eye, then I absolutely would. So that would probably be my, fantasy version of a superpower. If I had to choose what could be probably considered a more realistic superpower, the ability to speak every language. Polylingualism is definitely a reality for some people in this world, and I consider that such a superpower. I think it's just amazing to be able to communicate with people, in their most comfortable language, to be able to travel places and speak in a native tongue. I am language inept outside of English, but I, would always just love to have the ability to just communicate across every level, speak every language, and that's just a real world superpower to me.
Yeah, well, that was articulated like a true consultant. I love that. I love the structure there. Yeah, I think that's a really good superpower. And maybe, who knows? Maybe with Parthenon, you can be staffed to a project somewhere abroad and learn a language.
Yeah, I try to teach myself things occasionally. My boss is French speaking. My lab has had many French speakers, but man, the neuroscience in me would tell you it's really hard once you've reached a mature age to pick up a new language.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, a little bit more casual. What's your favorite thing to do outside of work and academics in terms of hobbies or interests?
Yeah, I'm a very active person, I guess, by nature. Exercise almost every morning. I like to cycle myself on and off different workouts. I like to create my own workout programs. I love warm weather. Warm weather is my favorite time of year just because you can spend time outdoors. I hate running, but I would love to run outdoors or on trails, something just to get me out in scenery. But that's just mostly been my lifestyle, kind of my whole life. I think a more recent hobby, this 2023, I guess, that I've picked up has been a bit into mixology. I like just coming home from work and evenings and playing around with making different cocktails. I've gotten quite into it. I like when people come over and just say, I don't know, make me something, figure it out, like whatever random ingredients I have, and just trying to mix up drinks like that. So that's something I've gotten more interested in and just kind of perfecting. I think I could have been a decent bartender in another life.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear your favorite recipe so far or currently.
Ooh, that's really hard. I mean, I'm a big classics fan because for me, a perfect martini goes a long way. A perfect Negroni, equal parts of something. You change around the ingredients, you can just like change the flavor profile. More of like the creative, interesting side. The other day, I was just looking what I had in my fridge, looking what was open. I made myself a blood orange sour sangria, and it was just a matter of what I had in my fridge. I had some blood oranges, I had some club soda, some open red wine I had to use. Just mix myself something like that. So yeah, like I'd say I'm a classics fan. Manhattans, martinis, Negronis, but I'm always open when someone's like, just use this and make me something sweet, make me something sour, or whatever it may be.
I love it. Yeah. Well, if I ever meet you in person, I'll have to call you up on that.
You'll have to put my bragging to the test, right?
Exactly. All right. Well, I know you spent your time playing collegiate athletics for a period of time. I'd love to hear maybe your favorite memory or story as your time as a collegiate athlete.
So many of them. That really is a hard one. And college athletics is no doubt like something in itself and something, you look forward to, something I always look forward to ever since growing up playing sports as a kid. I guess one of my favorite memories, one that always sticks with me, one year, I played college lacrosse. Our team was nationally ranked. We were neck and neck with some other teams in the division, trying to just kind of beat out our ranks. The team we were playing was a home game for us. A lot of the older guys on my team have spent their entire careers always losing to this one team, so pretty much considered a division rival. We won that game by 1 point in the final seconds. You could absolutely imagine the atmosphere was electric. The locker room after the game was crazy. The entire campus was, celebrating all night. And so I think that's just one of my favorite memories because, it was a long awaited win for some of the guys in the team. It's just the team camaraderie, being able to just celebrate the highs of that situation coming together, celebrating big win. And that's, what I always love about team sports. That's what I miss about, having team participation in things, team dynamics, especially, like I mentioned, doing bench science can be pretty independent sometimes. Although you work in a lab with a team of other people, sometimes your day-to-day is pretty independent. So I always like, the team membership. So that's a big memory. I've got so many of them, but it was just nice to have the campus-wide, atmosphere of that kind of celebration.
I love it. Well, a massively belated congrats on that win. It sounds like it was well-deserved. Dylan, that's all from me. I really appreciate you coming on and telling your story. This has been both really interesting as well as entertaining, and I'm sure all the listeners agree. Is there anything you want to add or say before we head off here?
Yeah, definitely thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to just share my experiences just because I understand what it's like wanting to listen to see how it was for other people. And in that regard, anyone who's listening, whether it be, months from now to years from now, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn, reach out. Always happy to discuss it no matter where I am in my careers. I know what it's like to want to reach out to people and just get a response back and look for information. People do it to this day, even though I haven't even, yet started as a consultant. I try and help anyone I can just with the process. So always happy to help any way I can. So feel free to find me, connect with me, reach out.
Great. That's very kind of you. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much, Dylan. Have a lovely day.
Yeah, thank you very much. You as well.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Chatting with Dylan was lovely, as we got to reminisce over our own consulting experiences in terms of recruiting. If you want to learn more about how to get help with recruiting, head over to managementconsulted.com in order to explore more and find ways to case, drill, or even just look at firm profiles. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time.